The best sports talk, period. Your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
Nine 17. Welcome back into the Gary Harris Show, and we got Scott Moore will be with us here in just a moment from iTalkSEC Radio and the Jay Barker Show. Let's go to Corey first, though, who has he's want to talk to Scott. Okay, well, let's just go and put Scott on then, and we'll get to Corey here in just a second. Good morning, Scott.
Top of the morning, Gary. How you doing, brother?
Doing well.
Sir.
We'll have Corey here. We'll get to him here in just a moment. Let's start, though, with the news of the day yesterday, and that's that Florida State pulls the plug on Willie Taggart. Man, that just turned out to be a disaster. I think that I said this earlier. If you don't think you've got the right guy, there's no reason to limp along. I understand that. I think it's best to pull the plug. Having said that, getting the right guy the next time is not always easy. You know, there aren't that many of the right guys out there. So just because you fire a coach doesn't mean you're going to get the right guy the next time. But what led to this? I mean, obviously they lost to Miami on Saturday, but for the guy to not even finish the season, that tells me that not only were they unhappy with the job performance, but must be some internal conflict there. It must be a mess.
Well, you know, Gary, one thing about it, I've had a chance to spend a lot of time in Tallahassee the last couple of years. As a matter of fact, I'm going back tomorrow for Bobby Bowden's 90th birthday celebration. And I got to be honest, I think I've told you privately, and I haven't mentioned it much on the air, but the first time I met Willie Taggart, watched practice, had a chance to be around him, I got the sense the first time I was down there that he may be in over his head, and I told you that. And then I went back this year in August, same situation again, a week before the opener with Boise, and I left going, I don't know if Willie's learned anything or not. And they went out and promptly lost that game to Boise State. And we saw this coming. This team has not played well all year. There's discipline issues. There's offensive call issues. There's defensive people lining up wrong. There's there's a lack of physicality, a lack of commitment to detail, just about a lack of everything in that program. And Willie Taggart is a great guy. I really enjoyed spending time with him. But I just got the impression that the moment Gary, look at the coaches that we're around in this conference on a daily basis and around college football on a daily basis. We know, especially when you go inside a program, you know what a championship program looks like, and you also know what one that is off the tracks looks like too. And that was the case. And listen, when they lost to Wake Forest a couple of weeks back, and and got spanked in another couple of games that they probably should have won, I think that was kind of the tipping point for everybody. We talked about the $17 million, and listen, I knew Florida State had the money to come up with. Yeah, you don't ever want to spend $17 to $20 million to get rid of a guy, but they didn't have any choice. They had to make that decision now. And it's the right decision because this situation was never going to get better. They had to cut bait, and they got to go try to get their program back now.
Indeed, they do. Any thoughts on where they're going to turn? Coaching candidate names? Anything coming up yet?
Well, there's some out there. You know, we've talked about a couple. I will tell you, and it's up to them, but there's a couple of names I think that are going to get into the mix. But they've already talked about, publicly about Bob Stoops, Mark Stoops. Those names are going to come up. I'll tell you a name that's going to come up, though, is Lane Kiffin and Brent Venables out of Clemson. And people are like, why would Venables go there? I'm telling you, Brent Venables is a guy that if they all get together and decide that's right, Brent Venables would leave Clemson for Florida State. There's no question in my mind that would happen. And I think he's got his name or his eyes on another job too. That would be the Oklahoma Sooners, depending what happens in Dallas. Because make no mistake about it, if Dallas doesn't reach the NFL title game, the NFC title game this year, they will not renew Garrett's contract. and Jerry Jones will go after Lincoln Riley, and he's going to offer him the moon to go there. So, and that would be the other spot Venables would likely be very interested in. I don't think Venables will go anywhere else in the country, but the two be a really good opportunity. So, but we're all early on. I think the shock is trying to get off down there. The boosters came up with the money and went to the university and said, hey, this is our money. This is what we do with our money. Now take our money and let's go forward. So I'll probably know a little bit more when I get there tomorrow night. But keep your eye on the Florida State boosters. They're very powerful, and those are the guys that are going to make the decision and recommendation to the FSU president and AD about where they need to go.
All right, Scott Moore with us for his weekly visit from iTalkSEC Radio and the Jay Barker Show. Right now, let's go to the Bud Light Hotline and welcome Corey in, who has got a question for you this morning. Scott, good morning, Corey.
Okay.
Good morning, Scott. Good morning, Gary.
Hey, Corey.
I'm doing great. Looking at this LSU game, I think it's going to be very important for both teams to pressure the opposing quarterback, because if you let the opposing quarterback stand there and throw, both secondaries can't just cover all night long against their other receivers. And with LSU's defense, they have experience with Terrell Lewis and Anthony Jennings for Alabama. I think it's going to be key for them to get pressure on Joe Burrow and for LSU to get pressure on Tua. But do you see an X factor in this game for Alabama that maybe we're not looking at? Because it's a really evenly matched game. Do you see an X factor that maybe that could decide the game that we're not looking at?
X factor, Scott, as far as Alabama against LSU.
Well, to me, and obviously it's the wide receivers, but to me, the team that runs the ball the best in this ball game is going to win it. The reason LSU beat Florida and Auburn is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He had two big games, 100 yards against both of them. So to me, Najee Harris has to have a big game. It keeps drives moving, it keeps possessions going, and you're going to need to run the football to bring LSU safeties up, to be more people into the box, and to keep them honest. And listen, LSU's going to try to do the same thing to Alabama. So whoever runs, I know it sounds crazy, but whoever runs the ball better in this ball game is going to win the game. It's that simple. And so Alabama's got to be mindful of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's been money all year for LSU. And on third down, Joe Burrow's legs, that kept drives alive against Auburn. So to me, the running game for Alabama's got to continue to play like it has lately. I think both teams are going to throw for yards. You got too many good receivers out there. And then the other thing is, this will be the difference. Red zone defense from LSU and red zone defense from the LSU Tigers. If you can hold somebody to a field goal, that's great. That'll help you win. But red zone defense, conversions on third down, and the running game is going to be what decides it. So submit to me, Najee Harris, X factor for Alabama, and then for LSU, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, their tailback, number 22.
All right, Corey. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary. Roll Tide.
All right, Corey there chiming in. You'd like to talk to Scott, or if you've got a question, you give him a call on the Bud Light Hotline as well, 205-342-9904. This is going to be a unique week because this season, Scott, let's just be honest, it has not been it's not been a great home schedule for Alabama. In fact, most of the people that have had tickets that have tried to get rid of them have just basically had to give them away or take nearly nothing. Now, all of a sudden, you've got the one game on this home schedule that is as big as it gets. I mean, this is 1 versus 2. This is, game of the century part 2. Alabama unbeaten, LSU unbeaten. LSU coming in here a totally different team from what we've seen in the past. And it should not only be a very competitive game, but it should be one of the more exciting games that we've seen in regards to offense between these two teams. Both of them are very explosive.
Well, they are, and the 4 top wide receivers statistically in the SEC are all going to play in this game, which is very, very rare. I don't think I can ever remember, you have a team having 2 great receivers, and Alabama's got 4 great receivers, and LSU's really got three guys that are just absolutely prolific as all get out. And right now, those 2 guys, Jamar Chase and and Justin Jefferson lead the SEC, and then behind them, Judy and Ruggs. They played a few more snaps, obviously, but listen, this is LSU's biggest game. This is what Ed Orgeron has talked about from day one. We got to beat Alabama. We have to beat Alabama, and we have to beat Alabama. You know, Alabama doesn't go about their business like this, Gary. Alabama goes and plays one game at a time. They'll tell you, hey, the next game is the one that's most important. We hear that a lot, but Alabama's done that better than anybody in college football with, 90 straight wins over unranked opponents. So, but LSU lives and breathes for this game. Ed Orgeron lives and breathes for this ball game. So I wonder, and I told you this before, this has always reminded me of Tennessee under Johnny Majors. They had some really good teams under Johnny, and they would come to Alabama week and things would get tight. They would play very, very tight in those games. And what? Bama wins 7 in a row while Johnny Majors is the coach at Tennessee. And I visited with Johnny. He said, you know what, I probably put too much pressure on our team because that game was so important to me personally. And LSU has played this game the last few years. I mean, they've been outscored 63-10 by Alabama. And so everything LSU does is based on the Alabama game. Now, since they lost last year 29-0, they have gone on I think it's a 12-game win streak now. They've scored at least 35 points in every game prior to that, up to the Auburn game. Auburn held them to 23. That's the only game in the last 12 that they haven't scored at least 35 to 42 points. So, you know, I just wonder how does LSU come in here and play tight? Does LSU put more emphasis on this game than they need to? They certainly have over the last decade. And if Alabama plays and approaches this game the way they have and LSU the way they have, I think LSU could have problems on Saturday. So, yeah, it's a different LSU team, Gary. But I also think it's a very, very beatable team. Their two biggest wins have come at home, and obviously it's very tough to win in Tiger Stadium. But this is not Austin, Texas they're going to Saturday night, okay? They're going to Tuscaloosa, Alabama at 2:30 Saturday, and it's going to be the biggest, most electric charged atmosphere that LSU's played on the road maybe in a decade.
Indeed, and I think you might be onto something with LSU making too much of this game too soon. It's clearly a huge game, but they've been almost obsessed, it seems. We'll take a break here with Scott Moore. We'll be back with a couple of more segments. If you want to get involved in the conversation, you can call the Bud Light Hotline at 205-342-9904. You know, when it comes to protecting what matters most, it makes sense to choose an insurance agent that's a part of your community. Your local Allstate agent knows the ins and outs of both owning and protecting a home in your neighborhood. And by choosing a local Allstate agent, you get an expert who knows the community and is committed to getting to know you, which means you'll get the protection that fits you and your life. Are you in good hands? If not, contact Andrew Kniffer with Allstate Insurance in Northport today at 205-722-9201. That's 205-722-9201. Andrew Kniffer, Allstate Insurance in Northport. He's local. He'll take care of you and your family. We're back with more from Scott Moore right after this on The Gary Harris Show.
Covering University of Alabama sports, as well as the national and local scene as well. The Gary Harris Show, only on Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
$9:33. It's a Metal Monday here on the Gary Harris Show, and it's also a Scott Moore Monday from the Jay Barker Show and iTalkSEC as we are diving headfirst into Alabama and LSU. Scott, the last time that Alabama lost this game, of course, was back in 2011, 9-6 in overtime. Great game, defensive game.
There was.
Alabama bounced back and won the BCS National Championship game 21-0 and has never looked back, although there have been some really close calls during that time. I said this earlier. You had a 9-6 game in 2011 in overtime, and some people think this game might be 49-46. But are we making too much out of the offenses? Because they're also two very talented defenses. These teams both have a lot of athletes on that side of the ball, and sometimes, as you know, in these type of games, the physicality is ramped up, and more times than not, these games don't always turn out to be shootouts. You'll see old school football employed. Do you think maybe this game will be more of a defensive game than what people are assuming?
I think so, Gary. I think it's a very, very good point. I mean, you look at Alabama, they didn't have Tua, but Bama scores 35 on Tennessee, and that came with a defensive score. And even though Mac Jones was playing quarterback, still it was a slow start for Alabama that night because Tennessee played pretty well on defense. So, and that was Tennessee. So, listen, you look at the Auburn game a couple of weeks ago, and the way that game kind of went, and Auburn really did a good job in the red zone. Listen, there's nobody that's going to tell me that Auburn's defense has better athletes than Alabama. They're a better defensive front, but from an athletic standpoint, okay, the back 11, the 12, 13, 14 guys Alabama runs out there, and they'll probably play 16 to be honest with you. But Alabama's starting 11 on defense now that we're in week 10 is pretty good. There's first round draft picks on that defense. Terrell Lewis is leading the SEC in sacks right now. They're healthy. They've kind of figured out their rotation. And listen, nobody's a freshman anymore, Gary. We talk about this all the time. When you get to November, you got 9 starts under your belt. You're expected to go out there and do your job now. Okay, and is there still learning? Maturing to do? Sure. Is there still growing? Yeah. But, from a talent standpoint, I like Alabama's defensive backs and their ability to match up man-to-man with LSU's wide receivers. That's big. That's huge. You can play man-to-man and disguise your coverages and do all that. And Alabama did a great job against that last year. I mean, Joe Burrow really had a difficult time in the red zone. Mac Wilson picked him off late in the ball game, and he didn't have a good night last year, and Alabama got pressure on him. But, the first caller we had was talking about pressure. One thing that LSU and Alabama do so well, these RPOs, you get the ball out quick. That it's designed to keep pressure off of you. So, while I think it's not going to be 9-6, the 49-42 type game that you may see, the one thing about the Big 12, they don't play defense out there. Alabama and LSU do play defense. Alabama's third in the SEC in total defense right now, and LSU's right behind them at 4. So these two teams are physical. That's the thing about it. Their physicality, they can run. They've got athleticism on the defensive side of the ball. So, they're going to score, but I'm like you. I think it's probably going to take – if you can get to 35 points in this ball game, I think 35 points is good enough to win it. For LSU and probably good enough for Alabama.
We said this a little bit earlier. LSU has not been shy about this game. I mean, it started
right
after the Auburn game in the locker room, in the post-game, players talking about Alabama and how badly they want a piece, and a little bit different approach here in Tuscaloosa. Of course, it's just it's the process, and the process really doesn't vary regardless of the opponent. And you see Alabama much more measured, much more just Alabama-like. If you're an LSU fan, and of course they're part of it too. I mean, not only are they expecting to win, if you listen to their chatter, they're expecting LSU to come in here and just unload on Alabama. I would be concerned a little bit in that, it's more than one game for LSU. Even if they lose this game, they still may have a chance to make it into the playoff. Do you think that you can be too hyped for a game like this?
Yep, I think you can. And listen, I was in Baton Rouge last year, and people forget this, but LSU was coming off a double-digit win over Georgia, who happened to be the number 2 team in the country, and had a week off. The hype in Baton Rouge last year for this game day was down there. It was off the chart. And here comes little old Alabama in with having not played anybody or beaten anybody, and Alabama just absolutely methodically took them behind the woodshed last year. And, missed a couple of extra points, or it would have been 31-0. And that game was never in any doubt. And listen, they went in last year with a ton of momentum, and the thinking down there in Baton Rouge, when you got there was, hey, we're going to win this game. And once you got to Tiger Stadium and got in the atmosphere, and I think I even texted you, Gary. That was with a couple of our friends, and we all know each other, and I texted you and I said, man, this is a scared crowd. This is a nervous crowd. And while they talk about beating Alabama all the time, I don't know if they really believe in their mind. I'm talking about their fans and their players. When you haven't done something in a decade, you just wonder if you can do it. There's a thought process there going, okay, we certainly believe we could do this, but can we really get it done? I think the difference in this game, honestly, is that LSU hopes it can win it. Alabama knows it can win it. That's a big deal when you're playing in 1 versus 2 matchups. Of course, this has not happened 1 versus 2 in the AP poll since Alabama and LSU in 2011 in the regular season. So that's an interesting tidbit. I would have thought differently over the last decade, but 1 versus 2 have not met on the field in the regular season since 2011. So it's kind of shocking that this doesn't happen as often as you think. But that being said, LSU hadn't been in a lot of 1 versus 2 matchups. So Alabama has in the bowl games and in BCS games and obviously college football playoff games recently. Alabama knows how to handle these kind of games. They know when to play these games. They didn't talk about LSU last week. LSU spent the whole week talking about Alabama. So, listen, Alabama's got the advantage on all that stuff, and until LSU proves to everybody it can go win a game like this, you know, you got to prove it to me, man. Alabama at home Saturday, that is going to be a very difficult task for LSU.
Indeed. I think the home field advantage here has been overlooked some because, of course, Alabama's played so well in Baton Rouge. But I think in this scenario this season, it's big for Alabama to have this game at home, Scott. I think that's something that has not been touched on. But this game's going to be at Bryant-Denny. I think Alabama has a great home field advantage, number one, because they're usually good. But I think Bryant-Denny is underrated when it comes to big games. This crowd is going to be pumped, and I think it's going to be difficult on LSU.
I do too, Gary. And listen, think about this. The last time Alabama lost a November home game, it was all the way back in 2012 against Texas A&M, and that was following the LSU win down in Baton Rouge with the screen pass from McCarron to Yeldon. And I think Alabama was not focused, obviously, when they played that game. Alabama's had a week off. They're going to be focused mentally. It's tough to beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I think Alabama hadn't lost a home game since Ole Miss beat Alabama in 2015, 31 straight, longest streak in SEC history. Listen, LSU's going to have to play great Saturday to win this football game. They're certainly capable of it. But, Gary, I think it's time to put all the talk away and all that. Bryant-Denny is going to be on fire Saturday. I think the fans want this challenge. I certainly believe Nick Saban and his players are going to be champing at the bit to play this game Saturday. You talk about home field advantages. This crowd has not had one maybe since the Auburn game a year ago. Everybody's revved up and ready to play this game. It's going to be a very difficult environment for LSU to play in. And, you know, we've seen teams have a difficult time doing that this year on the road, particularly down there in Tiger Stadium.
We don't know anything for sure on Tua, may not know anything for sure. We'll see if Nick Saban offers an update today at noon in his press conference. But Alabama, if Tua plays versus if Tua doesn't play, how much does that change their team?
Well, it certainly changes everything. You know, you take all due respect to the other great players in the country, you know, besides Chase Young, you know, over the last 2 years, Tua Tagovailoa has been the best player in the country until he wasn't. Okay, let's just be honest about that. It's really up to him and his health. But when he's playing at a high level, Alabama's very, very tough to handle. That being said, I just think that, you know, you take the best player off of any team right now, the best player on the roster, it certainly changes things. However, you know, this is still the most talented roster in college football. All due respect to Ohio State and Georgia. The talent on this team, 1 through 85, you take one guy away, you kind of like your chances against anybody moving forward. You don't want to lose your top player, Tua, but I think Alabama's very, very capable. Would it change the game plan? Probably. It would certainly cause Mac Jones to have to execute at a very, very high level. Wouldn't be any margin of error. But we've seen Alabama teams do this in the past. So, listen, I think the roster, the receivers, the people, the supporting cast that the quarterback has at Alabama is the best situation in all of college football. Nobody else in college football has the supporting cast from an offensive line skill set other than Alabama. You make it say Ohio State, maybe you could go Clemson, But, we're talking about elite teams right now. So Alabama's an elite team, and they would still be an elite team if Tua can't play. I fully expect him to play, Gary. I think he'll go and play. And honestly, he wasn't very healthy last year. Alabama still won the game 29-0.
9:45 with Scott Moore here on the Gary Harris Show. And we're going to get to a break here in just a second, come back with another segment with Scott. Hey, listen, your home's probably the biggest investment you're going to make in your lifetime, for most of us anyway. And maybe you've been in your home 15, 20 years, and you feel like, gosh, it's still nice, but it's just a little stale. But you don't want to spend a ton of money to revamp it. Just add shutters. That's right. Very simple. Just Add Shutters, Inc., locally owned and operated for over 24 years while carrying the prestigious A-plus Better Business Bureau rating. Roy, Sam, Bubba, they can take care of you. Give them a call at 205-752-3476. Let them come out, look at your home, give you an estimate, and then by just adding shutters, you can turn the whole look of your home around, man. I mean, you won't believe what they can do for you. They are known for those outstanding American-made hardwood plantation shutters, and they offer these premium shutters in any color or size. So give them a call today. Just Add Shutters, 205-752-3476. We're back with another segment with Scott Moore right after this.
Home for Alabama Crimson Tide football. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
'Cause I'm TNT, I'm dynamite, TNT, and I'll win the fight.
It's a Middle Monday here on the Gary Harris Show. Welcome back in. One final segment with Scott Moore. We've been discussing Bama LSU. Ed Orgeron has made a lot of strides there. You have to give the guy credit. I mean, in bringing in Joe Brady, who was, not well known. I mean, he was only 30 years old, and suddenly he's the, God's gift to college football. And he has done a nice job implementing that new style offense. So you have to give Coach O some credit. But still, Scott, I mean, you have to look at Nick Saban and Ed Orgeron as a coaching mismatch, don't you?
Well, that's the thing that I look at. And listen, you're right. When they hired Ed Orgeron, I think we all were like, "What? Are you kidding?" And Ed Orgeron has proven to be a great fit there. And sometimes it is about fit. It is about getting the right guy. And I think when Joe Oliva made the decision to hire O, that we're kind of like, well, look at what happened at Ole Miss. Look at what happened at, when he was there running that program. But you give a guy keys to the Ferrari at LSU, and make no mistake, it is a Ferrari. And you get the natives happy, you get the in-state recruits feeling good. And listen, he rolled up his sleeves when he got this job, and he went out and recruited well. And this recruiting class that he got 2 years ago is kind of the bulk of what is doing the work for this team right now. The receivers were all brought in by him. Obviously went out and got Joe Burrow. He's kept Dave Aranda on the defensive side of the ball, who's a dang good defensive coordinator. And then he's gone and said, you know what, we've got to improve on offense. And when they got beat again, 29-0 by Bama last year, they got in a meeting on Monday and said, we've got to do things differently. We have to, or we're going to get left in the Stone Age here. And they have improved offensively ever since that night. They decided to be more wide open on offense, throw the ball more, and then spent the whole offseason and fall dedicating to putting this passing offense together. And Burrow's been great, man. He's a big quarterback. He's 6'4", 215 pounds. And listen, a good coach, Gary, a good coach evaluates himself. A good coach goes, you know what, we need help. Let's go get this guy to come in, and a good coach delegates. And that's what he's been able to do. And he's got the fans behind him down there, where the fans hadn't been behind all on the same page down there in a long, long time. Not probably since, LSU last beat Alabama in 2011. And then they kind of turned on Les Miles after that national title performance, and there was complaints for the next 5 years. And so I think their fan base is united. They're certainly recruiting well. Gary, they got the number one recruiting class in the country right now, according to 24/7 Sports. Not Clemson, not Ohio State, not Alabama, it's LSU. So he's recruiting well. Recruits know that there's some stability in the program right now, and there is. And so they're probably gonna win 11 games this year again. And so 10 wins last year, 11 this year. They're on the right track, Gary. And you're right. This guy is proving himself every week that he's a very good football coach, and he's capable of running a big-time program. And you got to give him kudos. Now, can he beat Nick Saban head-to-head? He knows it. LSU knows it. That's the thing. Can he devise a plan and get his team to the point where they can get this game in the fourth quarter and win in Tuscaloosa Saturday against the greatest coach of all time? Easier said than done, Gary. Much easier said than done.
No doubt about it. All right, a couple other topics I want to hit on before we let you go. Georgia, gets it done. I mean, that's the thing about the East Division. Let's just be honest. All the talk about the East, the West is still clearly the better division. And here's Georgia. Yes. You lose at home to South Carolina, and it really doesn't impact you. I mean, they've got the tiebreaker now against Florida. They would probably have to lose 2 more times not to make it to Atlanta. Give them credit. They have not been playing great football, but Fromm bounced back on third down. They just they owned Florida. That was the difference in the football game.
Sure,
and now Georgia clearly is the favorite to come out of the East.
Yeah, and listen, I think Lawrence Cager, who was banged up against South Carolina, he got hurt first half of that ball game and didn't play. And you know what? Jake Fromm didn't play well, right? He struggled against Kentucky because Lawrence Cager wasn't there. Cager comes back Saturday. Look what happened. He was the difference in the ball game. He has been their big-time go-to guy all year, and he's been the safety blanket for Jake Fromm. And third down Saturday was absolutely amazing. I think Florida had third and 13, Georgia had third and 12 to 15 yards at least 4 times in the ball game, and they converted all 4 times on that. They were well above 60% in the third down ratio on Saturday. And Fromm is one of the best quarterbacks in the country under pressure. The back shoulder throws he makes. And listen, Georgia's defense doesn't get enough credit, but they're the best defense in the SEC. All due respect to Auburn, Georgia leads the SEC in every major category there is, and that's giving up points, that's rush defense, everything. They are really, really good on defense, and they confused Kyle Trask all afternoon. Kept them in third and long, and listen, that's a team you don't want to have to play in Atlanta for anybody. It's a de facto home game for the Dogs. They play differently in that stadium, and they're a very, very good team. This happened to them last year. Lost to LSU, got it together, and then got into Atlanta in December with a chance to get to the playoff. And give Kirby Smart credit; they rallied their team. Jake Fromm helped rally that team, and they're going to be in Atlanta waiting on the SEC West champion.
Finally, Scott, a couple minutes left. Gus Malzahn, Auburn holds off Ole Miss 20-14 in a game that was quite frankly closer than it should have been. This community that we're in is media people, and there's things that we discuss on the air, and then there's things that we hear, obviously, that we don't always discuss. But there's that underlying conversation going on among some media people that talk to coaches, that even though Gus Malzahn got the big extension a couple years ago, and all could be well again. If he knocks off Georgia and Alabama again the way he did a couple years ago, they'll be ready to crown him again. But you get the sense, and you're hearing some things that maybe it's just not a good marriage at Auburn between Gus Malzahn. I'm also hearing that a lot of the big Arkansas boosters just want Gus Malzahn to be their coach at some point. He would be beloved there, whereas at Auburn, he's not necessarily beloved. Do you think that the time could be coming to an end sooner rather than later for Gus Malzahn at Auburn?
Well, Gary, I think that it is, and because let's be honest, the Auburn team that we've seen the last couple of weeks, they're not good enough on offense to beat Georgia and Alabama. They're just not. I mean, I know playing in Jordan Hare is crazy and all that, but they don't. It's not a good matchup for Auburn. These are the two, these are 2 very talented teams that are arguably the 2 most talented teams they're going to play all year. So it's just different when you're a little bit better. Georgia's much better than they were in 2016, and then Tua and company going into Jordan Hare down there. So they didn't play well the other night, certainly at all. Played well on defense, but didn't play well on offense in terms of execution. They put up a lot of yards but couldn't get in the end zone. So if he doesn't win those 2 games, it's going to completely change the dynamic down there. It'll be an 8-4 season, and you would have lost to every big SEC team you played this year: Florida, LSU, Alabama, and Auburn, and that would be 2 on the road, 2 at home. And so, Alabama and Georgia. So if he's 8-4 at the end of this year, and depending how what they look like against Georgia and Alabama, you're right. An exit strategy could be imminent. And I think Auburn, the fan base there, when you talk to Auburn fans and you talk to people off the record, you know, I don't sense that Gus has got a whole lot of support there. And I'll tell you this, Gus Malzahn probably knows that better than anybody, right? So, and you're right. He would be beloved at Arkansas. Chad Morris right now, he's got a worse record than Willie Taggart had, and they're just terrible. This is the worst Arkansas team that I can ever remember, and this is a proud program, and I think they're probably ready to move on from Chad Morris as well. Again, that's a bad fit, Gary. They're not going to win with Chad Morris at Arkansas. They may never even get a conference W. If you can't beat Mississippi State at home, you're not beating anybody else. So there's a lot of dynamics here. Dominoes are going to start to fall.
All right, Scott. Yeah, man, we got to wrap it up. But
my bad, brother.
No, that's all right. Real quickly, just what you got coming up today?
Well, I'll be hosting Jay's show today. We'll be all getting ready for this game. It's going to be a fun week. So follow us on Twitter, Jay Barker Show, and then iTalkSEC from 4 to 6 today. We are sportsradio.com.
Thanks, pal.